On January 7th, 2021, one day after violent protests beset the Capitol building in Washington, Facebook suspended Donald Trump's account for the remaining duration of his presidency. A few months later, in June, Facebook announced a 2-year suspension for Trump's accounts, effective from that initial suspension date at the start of the year. 2 years later, in January 2023, those accounts were reinstated by Facebook, or rather now Meta, with the purported risk to public safety having, quote, sufficiently receded. Now, predictably, this all caused a fair amount of bad blood between the Trump camp and Meta. Indeed, in August last year, Trump went as far as threatening the Meta CEO with life from prison if he meddled in the forthcoming election, something which Trump claimed had happened 4 years earlier. Trump wrote this in his book, Save America, published last year. He told me there was nobody like Trump on Facebook. He, of course, is talking about Zuckerberg here. Trump is talking about himself in the third person. But at the same time, and for whatever reason, steered it against me. We are watching him closely, and if he does anything illegal this time, he will spend the rest of his life in prison, as will others who cheat in the 2024 presidential election. Forget the jury system. I will make sure he spends the rest of his life in prison. By the way, he's talking about one of the wealthiest people on earth there. Extraordinary. It has since been acknowledged by Zuckerberg that not only did Facebook block adverts alleging election fraud after the 2020 election, but more importantly, it also demoted a potentially damaging New York Post story about Joe Biden's son, Hunter. So, with relations between Meta and the incoming president anything but cordial, it wasn't a surprise when former Lib Dem leader Nick Clegg announced his resignation last Thursday. Zuckerberg had appointed Clegg as Vice President of Global Affairs and Communications in 2018. The reasoning behind that appointment was the view that Clegg was well suited to fix Facebook's reputation in the aftermath of the Cambridge Analytica story. He could soothe regulatory issues in Europe while also being able to deal with Republican and Democratic politicians in a specific and unique way in the US, in the way that a US national might not be able to. I don't have a side. I'm British. But Clegg was also deeply implicated in the decision to ban Trump. Thus, the clock was ticking for him as soon as it was confirmed that Kamala Harris had lost last November. But Clegg's exit last week was merely the preface to the real story, which is a 180-degree turn by Zuckerberg himself on censorship. Earlier today, the Meta CEO published a video on Facebook announcing some changes that are forthcoming. Zuckerberg started by saying how Meta would return its focus to free expression.
Hey everyone, I want to talk about something important today, because it's time to get back to our roots around free expression on Facebook and Instagram. I started building social media to give people a voice. I gave a speech at Georgetown 5 years ago about the importance of protecting free expression, and I still believe this today. But a lot has happened over the last several years. There's been widespread debate about potential harms from online content. Governments and legacy media have pushed to censor more and more. A lot of this is clearly political, but there's also a lot of legitimately bad stuff out there. Drugs, terrorism, child exploitation. These are things that we take very seriously, and I want to make sure that we handle responsibly. So we built a lot of complex systems to moderate content. But the problem with complex systems is they make mistakes. Even if they accidentally censor just 1% of posts, that's millions of people. And we've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship. The recent elections also feel like a cultural tipping point towards once again prioritizing speech. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms.
And next up, Zuckerberg explained what all of that means in practice.
First, we're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes, similar to X, starting in the US. After Trump first got elected in 2016, the legacy media wrote nonstop about how misinformation was a threat to democracy. We tried in good faith to address those concerns without becoming the arbiters of truth. But the fact checkers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created, especially in the US. So over the next couple of months, we're going to phase in a more comprehensive community notes system.
Sound familiar? Community note system. Legacy media being bashed. He sounds just like one Elon Musk. Let's look at another parts of Zuckerberg's video.
We're going to simplify our content policies and get rid of a bunch of restrictions on topics like immigration and gender that are just out of touch with mainstream discourse. What started as a movement to be more inclusive has increasingly been used to shut down opinions and shut out people with different ideas, and it's gone too far. So I want to make sure that people can share their beliefs and experiences on our platforms.
So we've now gone to a Musk X-style content moderation policy. We're not going to have fact-checking. We're going to have community notes. And he's also overtly saying that actually you can say things that previously weren't being allowed on things like immigration and gender. He doesn't say specifically what, but you can use your imagination. Back to Zuckerberg.
We're changing how we enforce our policies to reduce the mistakes that account for the vast majority of censorship on our platforms. We used to have filters that scanned for any policy violation. Now, we're going to focus those filters on tackling illegal and high-severity violations. And for lower severity violations, we're going to rely on someone reporting an issue before we take action. The problem is that the filters make mistakes, and they take down a lot of content that they shouldn't. So by dialing them back, we're going to dramatically reduce the amount of censorship on our platforms. We're also going to tune our content filters to require much higher confidence before taking down content. The reality is that this is a trade-off. It means we're going to catch less bad stuff, but we'll also reduce the number of innocent people's posts and accounts that we accidentally take down.
We're going to go back to Zuckerberg in a minute, but bear in mind, everything he's saying here, he's saying, there'll be less moderation, there'll be more peer review by users. They're going to save a lot of money, right? You can lay off quite a few people. You can probably use quite a lot of AI. So the idea that this is just about free speech is also about the bottom line. And it's about being able to reduce headcount, which, by the way, X has done to an extraordinary extent. And Meta's probably looking at that and thinking, hey, maybe we can reduce headcount by 30%. That would be really useful as a business. Zuckerberg outlined the last two changes that Meta would be introducing, the most interesting of which was that the company would be moving its content moderation from California to Texas. That's right, the same state where Elon Musk moved X Core in September last year. So we've now got community notes, and Meta is literally going to the same state where X is. Could you get any more obsequious? After announcing those changes, Zuckerberg finished by saying this.
Finally, we're going to work with President Trump to push back on governments around the world that are going after American companies and pushing to censor more. The US has the strongest constitutional protections for free expression in the world. Europe has an ever-increasing number of laws institutionalizing censorship and making it difficult to build anything innovative there. Latin American countries have secret courts that can order companies to quietly take things down. China has censored our apps from even working in the country. The only way that we can push back on this global trend is with the support of the US government. And that's why it's been so difficult over the past 4 years when even the US government has pushed for censorship. By going after us and other American companies, it has emboldened other governments to go even further. But now we have the opportunity to restore free expression, and I am excited to take it. It'll take time to get this right, and these are complex systems. They're never going to be perfect. There's also a lot of illegal stuff that we still need to work very hard to remove. But the bottom line is that after years of having our content moderation work focus primarily on removing content, it is time to focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our systems, and getting back to our roots about giving people a voice. I'm looking forward to this next chapter. Stay good out there, and more to come soon.
Feel good, happy, this is great, civil liberties, freedom of speech. Forget the fact I'm going to be able to save billions of dollars. Forget the fact I'm relocating the business to a state where there isn't even full bodily autonomy for women. Don't worry about that. We are looking after your right to free speech. Michael, what did you make of Zuckerberg's newfound support for free speech fundamentalism and the fact he's going to Texas? It's not even subtle, is it? Let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it looked a bit like he was reading a script that someone else had written. I mean, I suppose it probably was one of his underlings, but it looked like it could have been Elon Musk or Donald Trump or whoever. I don't use Facebook enough to really know what these changes would mean. Personally, I actually think that community notes was the only good thing that Elon Musk did with X. I think sort of what ruined X was having an owner who was constantly sharing misinformation, far-right misinformation, and the way that sort of the monetization of it meant that people were really, really incentivized to put out just complete crap and monetize it and earn money from it. That was basically Elon Musk's vision for the platform, which is why it's just full of complete crap. Right. I don't know what community notes would mean for Facebook, but actually the sort of Wikipedia model of fact checking, I think, is probably more effective than the top down. Let's leave it to a corporate department to do it. So I've actually got no problem with that. We'll have to see in practice what it looks like. I think politically, what this shows is how different Trump's second term in office is going to be to his first, right? Because compare this to 2018, right? 2018, Trump had already been in power for 2 years, and still all of these corporations were sort of struggling to say, how did we let this guy in? Well, he was president, right? So Facebook employs Nick Clegg, clearly a massive liberal, while Donald Trump is president. And you had all of these corporations who didn't want to sort of publicly associate themselves with the president because they thought that could have financial costs for them because he was so unpopular among huge parts of the American electorate because he was so divisive. He wasn't good for business. What you're going to see over the next 4 years is not only has Donald Trump within his own team managed to get people who are more aligned with his project, but the entire American establishment seems to be saying, okay, this time's completely different. No opposition from us, Trump and Musk. I mean, it's really, really important that Musk is there because Musk, remember, he's heading up the Department of Government Efficiency. Potentially, he's going to have a lot of control to regulate the American economy when he is one of the biggest players in the American economy, right? So if you're a competitor of Elon Musk, which Mark Zuckerberg is, then you're going to be pretty terrified that this guy is going to change all the rules to disadvantage you and advantage him. So I think what we're seeing at the moment is all of these people sort of bending the knee, saying, oh, Musk, Trump, be nice to us. We're going to do everything you want. And I mean, that's really worrying, right? If you've got Donald Trump, a candidate who sort of in the run-up to the election wasn't particularly shy about what he wanted to do. He wants to lock up lots of people. He's got no interest in elections. Right? He wants mass deportations. And if you've got all of these different parts of the American establishment, one by one, saying, this time's different. We might have opposed you 4 years ago or 8 years ago, but this time it's completely different. Whatever you want to do, we'll go along with you because the American people have spoken. Now, I mean, we've discussed on the show that sort of that whole Trump derangement syndrome, it was Russia, this is an aberration, an accident must have happened, this must have been sort of fixed from abroad. Some of that was liberal delusion 8 years ago. But at the same time, I think there's a big danger of overcorrecting, whereby suddenly now everyone is like, actually, Donald Trump has a point. Let's let him do whatever he wants to do for the next 4 years. And if you've got the richest man in the world, who, by the way, has all of these government contracts, controls 60% of the satellites in space, this is Elon Musk, of course, and then Donald Trump, someone who has no moral qualms whatsoever, no respect for democracy. And then you've got the entire American corporate establishment saying, whatever you want, we're on your side this time. Then that is a dangerous situation.
Yeah, it is. I mean, just to go back to something that Zuckerberg said, I think in that final excerpt, he's saying there are problems in South America, Europe, and China. He's now comparing the European market for Meta to China. That kind of gets me on edge. He says they're not doing the right things for innovation. What, is the US now going to impose a structural adjustment program? Are they going to occupy us? Are we going to get sanctions? Because they're not innovative enough. We're gonna liberate them and force them to be innovative. Now, I know you think I'm joking. I'm not joking. You've got one of the wealthiest people in the world. He's 40 years old. I think he's the wealthiest person of that age or younger. One of the wealthiest people on the planet doing a 180-degree turn, saying, you know what, we were wrong, hands up, blah, blah, blah. When last year, the incoming president of the United States said he'd spend the rest of his life in jail. The two things are related, people. You don't need a PhD to work that one out. So if you have a world where US tech oligarchs are doing that, literally relocating their business to somewhere, well, not relocating a business, relocating part of their business to a state where, it's just culturally so at odds with California to appease Trump, I genuinely think we're going to see some really strange stuff happen in this presidency from the perspective of Europe. We're going to see some really strange stuff. We're talking about tariffs now on Canadian exports into America of 25%, something similar with regards to German car exports. Trump is saying that NATO members need to spend 5% of GDP on defense. In this country, that would mean we would need to find another £60 billion to spend on the military. Right? It's easy for generals and journalists and influencers to say, 5%. Oh, yeah, whatever. Where are you going to find the 60 billion from? Healthcare budget? Education? Infrastructure? Schools? It's got to come from somewhere. Really, really, really remarkable moment we're stepping into, I think, after January the 20th and the inauguration of President-elect Trump.